I've been away for, not away, I've been here, but I haven't been here for a few weeks, for 5 or 6 weeks. So, because it was the Chinese New Year. And Chinese New Year, they have a lot of celebrations. Then we have to go to the gracious heart to do ceremonies. So we have been very busy. And sometimes if you're too busy, you lose your concentration. So it's not good to be too busy. There's a saying, too much hard work makes Tom the dull boy, you know. If it's too much, if you're too busy. And it's not good to be too busy. You always have to strike the right balance between work, practice, and your leisure time. So sometimes if you're always in the process of giving, you don't consider that. You just want to give out all your efforts to do what you should do. And you still should strike, we all should still strike a good balance. Too busy is not good, especially if you're too busy in entertainment. Some people are too busy in partying, in entertainment, and going to restaurants and all that, but that's absolutely a no-no for us. There was an executive director in Hong Kong, Mr. Chen, and he was always busy. And one day he had a board of directors meeting, and there was a stormy session. He was so excited and nervous. So he came back from the stormy session of the board of directors meeting, and he still had the tension, and he released it on his secretary, Miss Wong. So he came into the room, he returned to his own room and said, Miss Wong, where's my pencil? Did you see my pencil? And Miss Wong was embarrassed and looked at Mr. Chen, and he said, oh, Mr. Chen, you got it tucked behind your right ear. Which ear? Which ear? So that's on your right ear. So I've been away for a few weeks. We don't have to do the Diamond Sutra so in a rush. We want to discuss every point in the Diamond Sutra. So in this session, I don't plan to go on to chapter 8. We have covered from chapter 1 to chapter 7. If you take a look at this, Diamond Sutra, section 1. Section 1 means chapter 1. Section 2 means chapter 2. And I have already covered up to section 7, chapter 7. And chapter 7, so that's on page 6. So I haven't started with chapter 8. The Diamond Sutra is one of the most prominent sutras in the Buddhist philosophy, and it contains 32 chapters. So we already have covered 1/4. And since I've been away for so long, I don't want to go directly into chapter 8. I would like to do a recap, a recapitulation. I want to recap on what we have learned so far. So let's go to, especially good for the newcomers, let's go to chapter 1. What did we see in chapter 1? In chapter 1 explains the causes of a congregation. One day the Sangha members went on alms round. You know what alms round is? Begging for food. Monks, the Sangha order, they go out. In the ancient days, at the times of the Buddha, they didn't cook. They just went out to beg for food. And then after they begged for food, this is what chapter 1 is all about. I'm just recapitulating on chapter 1. And begging for food and then return to the monastery. And after eating, they wash their bowls. And at this moment, one of the elders, one of the followers of the Buddha, one of the elders by the name Subhuti. He initiated a question which leads to further discussions, which leads to the formation of this very important sutra. So Subhuti raised a question. And so that's chapter 1. And some people may ask, how come the Buddha and his followers beg for food? Only beggars beg for food. How come they beg for food? Isn't it not right to beg for food? Well, this act of begging is a practice of austerity. It's just like working until time for rest and fasting until food is given. This is actually the practice of the 6 paramitas, the 6 prajna paramitas. Begging is an act which is in effect practicing the 6 prajna paramita. Do you know what the 6 prajna paramitas are? The 6 paramitas? Or you forget about them? I'm sure people remember. One of these 6 prajna paramitas in the Chinese language is 六度波罗蜜. 六度波罗蜜, the 6 prajna paramitas. What are these? 布施持戒忍辱禅定精进般若. Charity, morality, endurances, diligence, meditation, and prajna. These are the 6 guidelines for the practitioner of Bodhi to practice. Begging for food actually includes all this. Why? Charity, the act of begging from door to door, the monks beg from door to door, providing an opportunity for laymen to cultivate karma, good karma of giving. They beg from door to door, so all these lay people, they give out food to practitioners of enlightenment, to the Buddha, to his followers. That means they encourage lay people to give. It's always good to give. Giving out. Giving is more blissful than receiving. Always give. So they give an opportunity for the layman to give and to indirectly educate others, the act of humility. What is the act of humility? We always are proud of ourselves. They would like to conquer the ego and practice detachment from worldly desires. If you're always begging for food, you humbleize yourself. You get rid of your ego. You practice the act of humility. People are always arrogant. Why I have to beg? No, I give. I don't beg. So this is charity. This is the practice of charity. And how about morality? Observing the precept and taking food and not taking food after the nautical noon time, putting on robes during begging, and all these practices are upholding the precepts of morality. Monks, they don't eat afternoon, They don't eat after the nautical noon time. So we, including me, we have 2 meals per day only. The breakfast and lunch. We don't eat dinner. According to precepts, the Buddhist precepts, we only have 2 meals per day. Why do we have 2 meals per day and not 3 meals? You need to study the Vinaya. And I'm doing a recap only. If I go into every detail, it takes me hours to finish it. So I'm not going to get into that trap, which I always get trapped into. When I come to a point, I would continue until time's up. I haven't been to finish the first chapter on recapitulation. So I'm not going to get into details. I'm only give you the main points in the recap. So that is observing morality. And how about endurances? Going and begging for food under the sun and walk from door to door is an act of austerity and endurances. Of course, it's an act of humility. You always have to beg. You humbleize yourself. You conquer your ego. What are human problems? Human problems arises from the ego. So endurances. You endure the hot sun, endure the walking. You walk until given shelter. You fast until given food. That's austerity. That's endurances. How about diligence? Following the practice by bagging, returning to the abode, putting away robe and bow, and washing feet, and all these are acts of diligence and applying the right efforts. Hard-working, diligence. You really have to begging for food and wash the bowl and doing all these rigmaroles of the day, that you are practicing hard-working, diligence. How about meditation? Arranging seats, sitting down and crossing legs and focusing on what is before you and eating. This is all preparation for meditation. This is mindfulness. When they're eating, they concentrate on their eating. When they're washing, they concentrate on the washing. When they're drinking, they concentrate on the drinking. Some people, when they're eating, they're not concentrating on their eating. When they're drinking, you're not concentrating on the drinking. That's why sometimes they got poisoned. That's why sometimes they don't know what they're swallowing. When they're eating, they just chatter box on the dinner table. They just talk. We are not eating, we are not mindfully eating when we're eating. So actually, this is practicing mindfulness. Everything we do, we have to be mindful. Why do we have to be mindful? It is because we're not mindful, we committed mistakes. If you're always on the right track, you're mindful of what you're doing, in other words, you know what you're doing, you won't make mistakes. When you've done something wrong and people ask you, John, how come you have done that? I'm sorry, I didn't know what I was doing. How come you hurt him? I don't know. And some people say, the defense lawyer always talks to the criminal, why did you do that? It's terrible, tough work for me to defend you. Why did you kill him? I don't know. I'm not mindful. I just lose my mind. I don't know. You've got to be mindful in what you're doing. Prajna, lastly, remaining unattached and mindful throughout the practice of these 5 parameters is perfection of wisdom. You need wisdom to guide you in all practices. So, you need wisdom to guide you in your charity. You need wisdom to guide you in your morality. You need wisdom to guide you in your endurances. You need wisdom to guide you in your diligence. You need wisdom to guide you in your meditation. If you practice all the other 5 without wisdom, you may not be on the right track. You may be diverted into a side track which is wrong. So you really need wisdom to guide you in what you're doing. Wisdom. Prajna. We went details into Prajna Paramita when we explained the Heart Sutra, the Hridaya Sutra. Remember? For those who haven't heard Prajna before, you really have some work to do. Buddhism is so profound and abstruse that you can't just get it in a few sittings. We spend lives in studying it. Scholars of universities spend their whole tenure of professorship in lecturing and studying Buddhism, and you can get it in a few sessions. Just arouse your interest, further interest in it. All right, so that's chapter 1. I don't want to talk anymore, otherwise I'm not recapitulating, I'm repeating. So that's chapter 1. Chapter 2, what's chapter 2? So after they sat down and after all these routines of the day, after eating, and this elder monk, one of the 10 elders, one of the 10 prominent disciples of the Buddha, his name is Subhuti, and he initiated a question after lunch. Why Subhuti initiated the question? Why other elders? Subhuti excel in the understanding of the doctrine of Sunniatta. And Diamond Sutra talks about Sunniatta. What is Sunniatta? People may not understand in here. Sunniatta means emptiness. 空，你们听过空没有？观空 Sunniatta. Sunniatta is a Sanskrit language. And of course, you really have to find out what emptiness is. Emptiness does not mean nothing. What is emptiness? You have some research to do. Get into the internet and find more about emptiness. So, Subhuti asked the first question. Remember, in chapter 2, in the Diamond Sutra, you have to remember the key points by memorizing some of the sentences. For example, the first question is very important. You really need to know the first question. The initiative question leads to the formation, the discussions of the philosophy of emptiness. What's the first question? The first question Subhuti asked, world honor one. Virtuous men and women trying to develop the supreme enlightenment mind. How should their minds abide? How should they control their thoughts? What does that mean? When we are already on the right track in our spiritual development, assuming that we're already on the right track, walking that path of spiritual development, we are away from the path of attachment to materialism, we are away from the path of ego, and we are directing our efforts and energy to the path of enlightenment, the spiritual odyssey, we call it. When we are at that point, how should we maintain that mind? Rest that mind in there and gear our mind towards the development of enlightenment. How should we abide our mind? And sometimes we have all these wandering thoughts in our meditation. How do we control our thoughts? You think that's a simple question? It is because we cannot control our thoughts, that we have mental defilements, that we create karma. Because we create karma, we go through life and death. Because we create karma, we suffered. Not because of God. We suffer not because of God, not because of Buddha, because you yourself, you created your own problems. You are the creator of your own problem. You should be the one who dissolved the problem. The one who tied the knots. And if you want to untie the knots, it should be the one who tied the knot who untied the knots. You can't get somebody else to untie the knot for you. You have to resolve your own problem, control your own mind. And some people blame others for their problems. It's because of him. It's because of my dad, because of my husband, because of my wife. They always lay the blame on others. They don't look within themselves. You have to look within. So the first question is about mind. How do you abide your mind? How do you control your mind? So that's the key point in chapter 2. Let's get to chapter 3. I'm improving. Chapter 3, it concerns the real teaching of the Great Way. The Buddha said to Subhuti then, and he said, all bodhisattva, mahasattvas should subdue their mind as follows. You ask me how to control and subdue minds, they should subdue their minds like this. Bodhisattvas must liberate all sentient beings from suffering. Although immeasurable number of sentient beings are thus led to nirvana, or the extinction of reincarnation, yet the truth is that not a single living being has been liberated. Do you know what it means? It sounds inconsistency. The Bodhisattvas always help and save people from suffering. If you always give your compassion, you are the Bodhisattva. And when Bodhisattvas liberate people from suffering, in their mind, not a single being is liberated. Is there any consistency? Inconsistency? No, there isn't. Why? Why a Bodhisattva liberate people and then they should think that not a single being is liberated? Why? Now, if a Bodhisattva has the false notion of the ego, personality, being, and life, he is not a Bodhisattva. Remember these 4 key words. The 4 key words in chapter 3 What are these? The 4 keywords are the 4 fallacious notions in our mind. The 4 fallacious. It's a fallacy. It's wrong. It's wrongful. We have wrong conception in our mind. What are these 4 wrong conceptions in our mind? In everybody's mind. If you don't have that in your mind, you wouldn't be here. If you didn't have that in your mind, you wouldn't be in this universe. A universe of desires and suffering. What are these 4 notions? In the Chinese language. 我相, 人相, 众生相, 受解相. The ego, personality, beings, and life. Now this is a short abbreviated name meaning a lot of things. If you just look at the superficial word, you won't understand what it means. What do you mean by no ego? What is ego? What is this ego? What is this prison that you've been living in? Imagine we all live in the ego prison, in a cell, and it's with no windows. You just live in your own ego and you protect that one. And when the wise man come along, he opens the window for you so that you can watch out. Then you watch out, you look out, then you look the whole horizon of knowledge. But before that, your ego, what is this ego? That ego is I, the subject. The 5 skandhas. What does this I make up of? What does this ego make up of? The Buddha said the 5 skandhas, we all know. What is this ego? This ego is the I. The 5 skandhas, your body and your mind. This ego is the subject, the individual. Is it a good thing? The ego leads all of us into trouble. That's the first. The Buddha said, no ego. Can we practice that no ego? What is the second? No person. What does this person mean? You are the individual. Who are you interacting with? You are interacting with the you and them, the object and the recipients. The opposite of I, the counterparts that you've been interacting. When you have I, of course, you have the he, you, she, they, them. You're interacting with people. And they are egoistic too, this person. And what is the third? Beings. Because you attach to I, which is the ego, the subject, and then, of course, the objects, so comes the arising of subject and objects, the giver and the recipient. You know what I mean? If there's a subject, there's also an object. There's a giver, there's a recipient. Ego is the individual, person is the counterparts, and beings includes what? Actually, these 4 things includes the whole universe. What is the universe? Let's simplify it. Time and space. We live in a 3-dimensional world. What does this world make up of? What's the dimension of this world? It's time and space. In space, we see everything. Don't you see everything in space? What is in space? It's that ego, the I, the you, the we, the them, the they, right? So that's the ego, and the them, the they, and all that is person. And what is beings, the third terminology? Beings, that means other than I, you, we, they, them, all these other things, the lanterns, the books, all these occupy space. They are put in the category of beings. We are attached to them. Ego, persons, beings. Those deal with the space. All this space. Then what is the last one? Life. No ego, no person, no being, no life. What does life mean? It means a continuation of time. As I said, the universe is what? Space and time. Life signifies continuation of life. We always think that time is permanent. We never think that we'll be dying tomorrow. Dying to us is so remote. We never think of dying. We always think what we're going to do tomorrow. Life is short. Everything is a constant changes. We mistakenly recognize time as permanent. We mistakenly recognize time as a reality. Time is just a frame of reference. It's not real. We attach to permanence. When we're attached to permanence, we always want to keep. We always want to maintain. So, chapter 3. I don't want to go any further. Otherwise, I'll be repeating chapter 3. So chapter 3 brings out the 4 fallacious notions. People attached to ego, persons, beings, and life. We have to get rid of egos, beings, persons, and life. No being, no person, no ego, no person, no beings, and no life. So the problems with ego is that we always live in a self-centered world. We're always a self-centered. We always think of ourselves. We should change this self-centered attitude, this mentality, to a divinity-centered mentality. You look inside of you, the light, the wisdom that is inside of you. You change from this self-centered life to the whole divinity life, a life that is full of compassion, a life that is giving, a life that is for the vastness of the universe, for the immeasurable goodness of the whole world. You involve yourself with the whole instead of with your distinct little unit of ego. So in chapter 4, the Buddha, in order to explain further what it means by detachment, what it means by getting rid of the ego, what it means by changing your self-centered mentality to a divinity-centered. So the Buddha continued. He said, Subhuddhi, when a bodhisattva practices charity, his mind should not abide anywhere. That is to say, when make offering without a mind abiding in form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or things. In other words, when we are giving, when we are practicing, we don't rest our mind anywhere. We don't give conditions to it. In other words, our compassion is unconditional, not like love. Love is conditional, as I said. If the husband loves the wife does not reciprocate the love, the husband won't like it. One loves the other on the condition that you love him or he loves her. If it's not reciprocated, then it's not going to work out. Compassion is different, it's unconditional. Can all of us exercise unconditional love? If it is unconditional love, it's not called love anymore. It's called compassion. It's loving without condition. You help a stranger, you don't know him. You render your unconditional help. That's compassion. Now, chapter 3 concerns about the liberator and the ones being liberated. Chapter 3, I'm talking about chapter 4 now. Chapter 3 concerns about the liberator, the bodhisattva who helps, the liberator, help people from suffering, and the ones being liberated. So there's the subject and the object in chapter 3, or the giver and the recipient. Bodhisattvas should give liberation without the attachment to the notion of ego, person, beings, and existence of life. So in the words of the sutra, no ego, no personality, no beings, and no life. Now chapter 4 deals not only with the giver and the recipient, it deals with the gift, what is being given, and is there any attachment to what is being given? If I donate some money to the temple, for example, I'm the giver, and the temple is the recipient. What is being given? The money. So chapter 4 deals with the gift. In here, the Buddhists use charity as an example out of the 6 paramitas, as it is easier to understand, and it is the foremost and easiest to practice. In the 6 paramitas, the easiest to practice is to give. Why? So that's in number 1. It's the easiest to practice. Whatever I have, I just give out. I give. It's easier to practice. All the others, morality, endurances, diligence, and prajnas and meditations, they're more difficult. So the Buddha uses this charity as an example to show what he meant. So the Buddha, this is also to avoid, he uses charity, is also to avoid the verbosity of repeating every paramitas. So the Buddha used charity as an example, and he didn't go to exemplify it using meditation or endurance and diligence. He just used charity. And by thinking about that, you know that it also applies to the other 5 paramitas. The Buddha warns against attachment to 3 things when you're giving: the giver, the beneficiary, the act of giving. By not attaching to the above 3 notions, Bodhisattvas do not see the self that gives, nor do they see the other that receives, nor do they see any object given. You see what it means? By not attaching to it, because people like to say, oh, I saved that person. I'm the savior. I'm the highbrow. I'm a higher level savior, and he's the person I help. You already have that notion in your mind. You are the savior, and he's just a follower. He's just being helped. You already set up this relationship with his unequal. You already have this attachment that you are the savior. I am the savior. You are the victim. I render you compassion. Is there a problem in there? So you should, by not attaching to the giver, the beneficiary, the act of giving, the Bodhisattva do not see the self that gives. The Bodhisattva, when he liberates, when he gives, he does not see the ego that gives, nor they see the other that receives. In other words, so no beings are liberated because they shouldn't have an ego. You understand what I mean? So no person who gives, no person who receives. Because if you say this person receives, then you are the giver, you are the savior, and he is that poor little victim who received your savior's gift. Some people are like that. I donated $10 to the temple today, and I have great merits. Some people are like that. And some people say, I donated this $10,000 and I don't have a lot of money, but I think that I would like to help out. And I don't want my name to be inscribed in anywhere. Just forget about me. I just want to give. Unconditionally. There are very many unconditional heroes and heroines in the world who did great practices without their names being known. On the other hand, there are people, celebrities, who did a lot of good things and they want their name published on the newspapers and mass media because they attached to the giver, the beneficiary, and the act of giving, and the gift that is given. So, the Buddha says, a Bodhisattva should practice generosity without a mind abiding in false notions. Why? When a Bodhisattva's mind does not abide in form during practicing charity, his merit will be inconceivable, immeasurable. So that's what chapter 4 is about. When we do not attach, our mind is pure and free, without clinchings, without attachment, without the notion of merits that polluted our mind. Then this purity would lead us to nirvana. Now the Buddha taught the method, which consists in what? In looking into the non-existence of an ego as the main starting point. In your practice, you should practice no ego, no I. If the ego, the subject, does not exist, personality, the object, also disappears. When the conception of an ego and a personality is eliminated, then your mind is geared towards nirvana because you don't have that ego. You're egoless. When you don't have that ego, imagine every individual is living in that prison of ego. We always enclose ourselves in that prison of ego and living in there, we're in comfort zone. We always think that this is comfortable. We're in the comfort zone of being an ego, but that's not the comfort zone. That's the zone that creates problems. So one day you attain nirvana, you attain enlightenment, you attain Buddhi. All these walls of the ego prison crumble down. No more walls of ego surrounding you. They all crumble down to the floor. And then what do you see? You see the whole horizon of nature. You've been living in that comfort zone where you only see yourself. You're in that, like in this wall in here. We're all in this room and feel very comfortable. Can we see the outside? No, we can't, because we've been covered by the wall. When all these walls crumble down, the whole horizon, the view of the universe is revealed towards you. Your view is much wider. How wide, how vast, how immeasurable is that view? The Buddha got that view. The Buddha said, crumble down your ego. You see much further. It's a much wider world than that egoistic world that you maintain in your mentality. Let it crumble down. But you got to work towards it. If Buddha or God can crumble that ego prison for you so that you can see further, he would have done it already. You don't have to even ask. He can only tell you. He can only knock at the door. There's a little window. Knock at the window and say, hey, John, you got to look out. Don't be so comfortable in your comfort zone of ego. Look out. Look out from the window. There's much more in the universe. And John said, no, I'm comfortable in here. No, come on to the window. So John lazily goes to the window and peep out. And the wise man said, open the window. John said, oh, is it? He opened the window. The breeze comes in. He smelled the fragrance of the air, a breath of fresh air coming in. What is that window? Who is that wise man? Who is that wise man who tells you this is right, this is wrong? There's Lee over there. He tells you every Saturday what is right and what is wrong for the past few weeks. We got Buddha 2,600 years ago. He told you in that window, that's what you're to do. How many people open that window? How many people listen? How many people want that breath of fresh air? How many people know it's a much wider world than this ego prison that you're living in? Not very many. That's it for chapter 4. Chapter 5 now. Real discernment of seeing Tathagata. The Buddha continued to ask, Supati, what do you think? Can the Tathagata be seen by means of this bodily form? The Buddha continued to explain, don't attach to form. Don't attach to materialism. Don't attach to desires. Don't always be led by the three poisons of greediness, hatred, and ignorance. Do not attach to material. And he said, can the Tathagata be seen by means of this bodily form? That means, can you see the Buddha by looking at his form? When the Buddha was in this world, can you see the Buddha by looking at the meritorious and gracefulness of the Buddha's body? Or when the Buddha passed away, can we see the Buddha by the statue? The statue was structured and built in such a way that it shows all the meritorious forms. Very good face, gracious and all that. Can we say that is Buddha? Can we judge the Buddha by his form? We can't. Don't believe in form. Don't believe in appearances. Don't be misled by appearances. We always are misled by appearances. We only look at appearance and put our judgment on it. When we look at a person, oh, that guy looks good. We like him. He could be a criminal who just committed some wrongful act. Oh, that girl is beautiful. You just judge her by appearance. How about her demeanor? How about her personality? We run into problems when we judge people by appearances. In our first dating, we just look at appearances. Everybody put on a show. The simplest show is the cosmetics. You paint your face with all what you can afford, and then you go for this dating. You try to maintain that adequate on the dinner table. You try to put on the show. You're that good. And after they got married, you know what happened? Dirty socks all over the place, dirty kitchens. And then they have this first argument. Hey, John, I didn't know that you throw all your socks around. If I know that you have that, I wouldn't have dated you in the first place. Oh, now you know who I am. How about you? You know what that happens? Divorces. Don't misjudge people by appearances. The Buddha said, don't attach to form. See the essence of it. And that brings out the three things that we should know. The Dhammakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Namaya Kaya. What is Dhammakaya? This is the Dharma body as opposed to the physical body of the Buddha. It is formless, penetrating all existence, shining everywhere, and enlightening all. The Dhammakaya. If you ask me, where is the Buddha? I say, you want me to tell you the Buddha in form or in formless? The form is delusive, illusory. The form is just to show the essence of it. The form itself is not Buddha. But you cannot show the formless without using the form. The essence is conveyed by the form, right? Materiality and spirituality is one. They're not distinct. So the Dhammakaya is a formless. It's that nature in you, that divinity in you, that brightness in you, that wisdom in you, that you can see, you can touch, you can smell, you can even comprehend. We just call it for the sake of calling it. You've got to use the language to call it, otherwise we don't know what we mean. That's the Dhammakaya in the Chinese language. That is Fa Shen Fo. Sambhogakaya is a higher level, the reward body of the Buddha, the ideal body of a Buddha, which is produced after entering Buddhahood as a result of vows undertaken during the practices in the Bodhisattva's path. This is the embodiment of purity and bliss, resulting from the full accumulation of merits. This body can only be seen by Bodhisattvas, not by us. By higher level enlightened people, they can see the Buddha's Sambhogakaya. We can't see. Our eyes are limited, Our senses are limited, You think our senses are better than animal senses? Our ears, our auditory function is not even as good as dogs. Dogs can hear a few miles away. Eagles can see a few miles away on a little sediment seed from a tree. We can't. Our senses are not as good as some animals. And we believe we are. We believe all our senses make the accurate judgment on things. That's why we judge that's why we depend on our salesman to run the company only, and not the manager. Who are our salesmen as far as our body is concerned? Who are the front door workers in our body? Our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, our touch. These are the front end salesmen maintaining this body. And if you say, it's enough to have the front end salesman, they can run the whole body, and you're wrong. Sometimes they make the wrong judgment. They eat the wrong stuff. They listen to the wrong opinion. They chatterbox the wrong saying. they lie, they fabricate, they curse, they did all sorts of wrong things. And you rely on them? Do you rely on them? I don't rely on my senses. I only rely on the divinity inside of me, that brightness, that wisdom, that prajna inside of me. That works. That's in harmony with some people who are God, and some people call Buddha, some people call, I don't know, I don't care what names. Are you very particular with names? You must use that word, God? Go ahead. Doesn't bother me. But we've been using the word Buddhi. Does that bother you? So, that's the Sambhoga Gaya. So, Namaya Kaya is another body of transformation by which the Buddha appeared in a form seen by us. This body contains the 32 meritorious attributes and the 80 minor characteristics. Okay, that's chapter 5. Chapter 5, the Buddha reminds us not to attach to form. And then we go on to chapter 6. In chapter 6, the Venerable Subhuti said to the Buddha, "World Honored One, will there be living beings who, when they hear these teachings, have real faith and confidences in them? Would they believe in what are expounded to them?" In other words, this philosophy is so abstruse and subtle that would people believe in it? So questions arises as to whether people in the later generations, in the later years, will believe in it. And the Buddha said, Bodhisattvas will. The Bodhisattvas, of course, will practice it and believe in it. And Bodhisattvas are the people, are the sentient beings who always, life after life, coming back to this world to liberate people from sufferings. There are sentient beings who always are willing to go through reincarnations to come and help people out, life after life, non-stop, incessantly. For example, Siddhagapa Bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Mandrasa Bodhisattvas. There are Bodhisattvas who vow to, I won't attain Buddhahood until all sentient beings are saved. So the Buddha said, don't worry, there will always be Bodhisattvas around who help out people in many, many forms. That's chapter 6. How about chapter 7? Chapter 7, the Buddha said, Subhuti, what do you think? Has the Tathagata, the Buddha, obtained supreme enlightenment? Does the Tathagata give any such teaching? So the Buddha said, has the Buddha giving any teaching? Has the Buddha explains any teaching? What is this teaching? And Subhuti is very smart now. He gives a very good answer, and he said, as I understand the meaning of the Buddha's teaching, there is no such fixed Dharma called supreme enlightenment. And there is also no such fixed Dharma that Tathagata can expound. There is no Dharma. So Subhuti replied that there is no such fixed Dharma as supreme perfect enlightenment, because we should not attach to the Dharma. Why? Because the Buddha explains cannot be clung to, cannot be attached to, and cannot be expressed. It is neither Dharma or not Dharma. This is very profound. It's just like the logic. If somebody told you nothing is right in this world, nothing is right. Do you see the logic? If somebody told you nothing is right, then that means if nothing is right, what is said is also not right. Right? Logically. If I say nothing is right, so how about what you said? Your teaching. Is your teaching right? Is your opinion right? The Buddha said nothing is right. Nothing should be attached to, including what I teach. Isn't that logical? So the Buddha is affirming something and then negating it. He's affirming it, say, do this, do that. That will lead you to enlightenment. And then he said, negate it. Let go, negate it. That's very logical. If I say, I am God, this is what I said is always right, The Buddha said, what I said is just a raft taking you from this shore of confusion to that shore of enlightenment, and after you have crossed the ocean, get rid of the raft. You don't need the raft anymore. Don't attach to the raft. When you go from the Nanaimo Pier to Victoria, taking that boat, when you get on shore, you have to leave the boat. Can you get onto the shore of Victoria if you always hang onto the boat? However, you need that boat. That boat takes you from this shore of confusion to that shore of enlightenment. You need the boat, but you got to detach from the boat to step ashore. You can't just hang onto the boat all the time. That's chapter 7. And chapter 8, actually I have a lot more to say, but actually I need 3 hours for the recap, but I just shorten it. The fruits of meritorious deeds. Section 7 emphasizes on realizing nothing and teach nothing. Would this kind of thinking lapse into emptiness? Although we realize nothing and teach nothing, yet we should not have any attachment, yet there is no denying that merits do accrue from all these deeds. It does not matter whether you attach to the merits or not, merits do arise. The Buddha wants to affirm this. So he asked Subhuti, what do you think? If someone filled the 3,000 galaxies of worlds with treasures and jewels, do you think there's a lot of great benefits? Of course, Subhuti says yes. If somebody filled the whole universe with jewels and treasures, of course there's a lot of benefit. And the Buddha said, if you understand the teaching of the Diamond Sutra, if you follow the practice, all these merits and treasures will be many, many fold more than filling this universe with treasures. You see the significance of understanding this philosophy, practicing this philosophy? The merits so obtained is so immeasurable, so inconceivable. The merits won't lapse into emptiness. If you have done benevolent deeds, you accumulate merits. Merit is that which either guarantees a happier and more comfortable life in the future, or alternatively, increases the scope of spiritual opportunities and enlightenment. So, if you continue, this is the end of chapter 8 now, if you continue to study the Diamond Sutra, you will know that you have to eliminate your ego. No ego, no personality, no beings, and no life. Don't take the superficial word for the meaning. There's a lot of meaning behind it. Don't attach unconditional compassion. Gear your self-centered life to this all-embracive divinity life. Look within. Look within for the happiness. Don't look for happiness outside. It's all within you. It works inside of you. That peace of mind, the compassion, the unconditional love. It works. Happiness starts from the mind. Have you been studying your mind? The Diamond Sutra is a study of the mind.